Okay, so I have spotlit my video, so I should be hopefully the only person you can see on the screen. I've put you all on mute. That's just so that if there's any noises off camera, you don't appear, the camera doesn't jump to you, or your noises don't come onto the final recording. What I'm going to do is just shut that box down, and then I'm going to open the chat box at the bottom. So if you have got any questions as I work, as long as I see them flash up, I can respond to them there and then. Otherwise, it'll be same as usual, where I'll do my demonstration piece and then you can come off your mute and you can open your cameras and we can have a two-way conversation for us, with you texting at one end and me. No, you won't be texting, won't you? You'll be speaking at one end and me responding in live time. So that's the bit of the class that's not recorded. So if you re-watch the recordings, it'll just be that first part of class, that's first half an hour or so of me doing this demonstration, which will go out to you. So a special welcome to those of you who are in the room, and also a special welcome as well to those of you who are watching on the recorded version. So I hope you've enjoyed last week's class. I've put my pieces on across my shoulder of last week's class. I've still got my square grid, although I've washed out the container now, and the two little arrangements in the, what I like to call the bud vases, although I was rumbled by my husband because he recognised them as our drinking glasses, and he's got this thing about me not using our household items for our flower arranging. So I just told a blatant lie, and I said they were vases. Of course, he knew I was telling an untruth. But from feedback from you, I'm getting the impression that that was the hardest, the more challenging part of last week's class, when you were weaving to get the ball. So we were needing to weave 3 or 4 pieces of the lily grass into the ball to get some sort of solidity to it, but not to weave so many stems in that you didn't then have a wiggle room for putting through your statement flower and those extra pieces of the lily grass, if that was what you wanted to add in. So thank you to those of you who've posted your photographs in the free Facebook group, Flower Start World. And those of you who aren't on Facebook, there's no need to miss out. You're more than welcome to email me your work. And although I don't give a detailed critique of what you've been doing, I'm always happy to chat about what went well and what you would prefer to do differently next time. So today's project is all about using a lump of wood. So perhaps in the chat, have you got a piece of wood with you? And have you got a pair of coat hangers with you? Now, I did see in the Facebook chat that one of you was thinking of bringing or repurposing the wire wreath frames because you didn't have a dry cleaning hanger to hand. And I rather like that idea. So it will just be using the same technique as I'm doing, but reinventing it to use the materials that you've got. And so top marks if you're going off piste and adapting the technique. So to start with, I have got my lump of wood. So it's a log of wood. I don't know whether you've got a piece of wood like this, or whether you've got an offcut of timber, a much more regular shape. And the first thing you'll need to do is to decide which way up you want it to go. Does it have a natural resting place? Mine's got a slightly flatter bottom here, and this side is flat also, but it's got a bit of a cut at an angle, so it's got a bit of a kink to it. So I've decided to go with the sort of horizontal footing, and then I've got a bit of an exposed angled edge here. And of course, if you have got your lump of timber, you will presumably just have a much more regular shaped block. So what we're going to be doing is adapting our dry cleaners hangers to make this sort of elevated frame, and then we're going to suspend our flowers from it using our test tubes. Now I'll just hold this up here for the moment and then show you my test tubes. So the test tubes that I bought are about 15 centimeters long, and you can immediately see that if I wanted to create a hanging arrangement, well, there's not much room, there isn't enough hang down from my test tubes. So what I'm going to do, a little cheat or a little adaptation, is when I come to tie my test tubes on, I'm actually going to tie the tie mechanism on halfway down, so it just hangs a little bit better, and I'll build up my greenery layer up above. Now, Test tubes come in all sorts of sizes, and out of preference, I would have hoped that I could have found one this length, which was 7 centimeters long and seemed to sit much more, you know, in a more pleasing way. But it's limitations. You know, if I'd been to a wholesaler, you know, I might have been able to find them this dainty little length, but I was buying online and they've come out slightly chunkier than I would really have hoped for. Now, it may be that you're not using glass test tubes at all, and you might have some of these plastic tubes. So again, I've got a shorter one and a longer one, and you've got a decision there whether you want to use them in their natural state, that sort of milky look, or whether you want to cover them up with stem tape first of all to disguise it. Now, the thing you need to think about here, is this actually disguising your test tube, or is it actually making it more prominent? So I'll show you how to cover your tubes with your buttonhole tape, but it may be in terms of getting that lightness to your finished arrangement that you might actually just prepared to swallow the fact that these are plastic and just go with that sort of milky, translucent look that they've got to them. And then the other vital ingredient is aluminium wire. So if you belong to a flower club, and been to other flower classes, you will probably recognize this. It comes on a loose coil, and we're going to wrap it around a small bottle in order to get a coil, and that's going to become the bed through which we add on the test tubes and then our natural plant material. So what I'm going to do is to bring the second camera over. I'm just going to do a small amount of close work on the table in front of me. And then when I've got that close work done, so you can see exactly what I'm going, there's sort of minute details of things, I will then bring the camera back to me so that you can see me once I've got my structure here, actually do my arranging live. And really, the arranging here is really, really simple. We're just going to cut small quantities of flowers and put them into all those test tubes. So this is really one about the technique. How are we going to get our mechanics, our stand that we're creating to sit upright on the table, and then perhaps to get your creative juices flowing so you can decide how you're going to adapt this technique depending on what materials you've got, or perhaps you're thinking further down the line and something you could be doing for Christmas or in the new year. So hopefully this will be a very adaptable technique for you. So without further ado, I'm going to get up, bring my camera over the top, and then we'll have that looking down over my hands. I have also got my glue gun. When you do this, you are going to need an electric drill, or if your piece of wood is reasonably soft, you may be able to get away with a bradawl. Now, just a word of warning, I was getting my husband to help me out with the mechanics this morning, and we managed to snap the drill bit between us. And he said I did have a rather solid piece of wood, and I don't know whether it's because it's mature. This is sort of a decorative bit of wood that I have in my fireplace, which I must have had for the last 10 years. I don't know whether wood hardens over time or not, or whether it's just the particular variety that's causing problems. So you will need to do a bit of work yourself to get the initial holes in your wood in order that we can attach the wires to your lump of wood. Now, we did talk last week what happens if you haven't got a lump of wood, and if you haven't and you want that adaptation with using your sturdy glass vase, we can work through that as we go. So if you've got any specific questions about that, do let me know either in the live chat box or when we chat at the end of class. And if you're watching this video on record and you want to know how to arrange, or you want more details about how to create your structure by applying it to a vase, do let me know. So the watchword will be, if you have got a vase that you want to use, it's all about the balance. You're going to have to make sure your wire, your vase, is sufficiently sturdy that it's not going to fall over. My lump of wood is quite heavy, so I don't think I'm going to have any problems, but it's going to be a sort of technical feat, getting your drill out, but also making sure everything is weighted properly so it's not going to fall over. Right then, I'm going to bring that second camera in. So what we have got here is my lump of wood. I'm going to make, well, spoiler alert, I've already made a pair of holes on one side and a pair of holes on the other. And what I did before I made my holes, this is a hole from something else in the past, is I did measure up to begin with. So, you know, taking your old ruler and just measuring up how high you want your holes to be. So because my piece of wood had this slight angled edge on it, I've made my little holes sit a couple of centimetres below that ridge, and then I've measured up how high that was. So for me, that's 11 centimetres high, and when I came to do the matching holes on the other, I have measured up. So I started off just doing pencil holes to begin with, and because each bit of your coat hanger is going to go into, the one coat hanger is going to go into the front holes and one in the back. You just need to make sure that when you've got your holes, they are as opposite each other. So if I put my thumb and forefinger where my holes are, you can see that I've, if I join my fingers together, that is where my coat hanger is going to hang up. So imagine I've done my holes to mark. I get my drill out and then come back in again. If you haven't got a drill or you want to make the holes a bit bigger, you can work through with your braggle. This is going to be, though, pretty hard work to do it just with a braggle. So it will be much, much easier if you have got your drill. So the next thing we need to do is to prepare the coat hangers. And the reason I've gone for a coat hanger again is because it's hopefully something that is reasonably easy for you to get hold of. The soft aluminium wire that we're going to use for our decorative layer is just not strong enough to act as a substitute. But in an ideal world, you would have had a nice straight piece of wire. You could have then bent into the shape that you wanted to have it. And I'm going to be slightly restricted because of my rectangular coat hanger to start. So I don't want this hooky bit at the bottom. So I'm going to take my wire cutters and cut my hanger pink and get rid of the hook. I'm pulling faces as I do this. There we go. And then you can see the idea being that we would place that side in there and that side in there to give us our little upright section. And then I've got hot glue, so when the camera comes back to me, I would do this the right way around. I'm just going to mock this up to begin with, and then you would do the same with the back set of holes too. So that will be your prep for that. The next thing we need to think about is your test tubes. Are you going to be using your plastic test tubes, or are you going to go for the glass ones? And if you want to cover the plastic test tubes up, you can do that using stem tape. So this is the tape that you would use to make buttonholes with. I've chosen the one that is the brown variety that's sort of got the look of crepe paper. You can get this in green, and if you really look around, you can get it in white, gold and silver as well. So this tape isn't sticky. It's just becomes tacky in the warmth of your hand. And you can see that I've just gone once around the top of the test tube. If I hold it down with my thumbnail there. We were talking before we were interrupted about covering the test tubes, the option of covering your test tubes. I've been round and it's not a sticky tape, it just warms up and becomes sticky in your hands. So I hold it down with my thumb where the join was, and then I pull it, sort of, I shouldn't say pull, really ease it at an angle so that it starts to spiral down the tube. So I'm just stretching it a little bit. It's got a little bit of ease and give. And you will need to decide whether you want to do this if you've got plastic test tubes. My preference would be, I think, if I was going to use my plastic, I might actually use them uncovered. Because I think by covering them up, yes, it gets rid of the plastic, but it then makes it visually quite dominant, having this tape over the top. And when you get around to the bottom, you just go round and sort of mush it round at the top and pull it off. And there you have your covered test tubes. So I will do a little bit of prep with my test tubes because I know I'm going to tie them into place. I have got my bind wire here. And again, I've got green just because that's what I had to hand. And I'm going to take a longish bit of bind wire. That's probably about 40 centimeters. I'm not measuring it. And I'm cutting that in half. And then to attach my test tubes to the frame we're going to create, I'm going to go halfway down my test tubes. My natural inclination would, if I had a short test tube, would be to tie the wire, the bind wire at the top and let them dangle down. But because I know my test tubes are quite long, I'm going to go halfway down. So I'm going round twice, or if you've got enough wire, you might go around 3 times and tie it off at the side. Now my test tubes are quite long and therefore quite weighty in comparison to everything else. So what I'm going to do is to repeat that on the other side. So I've got 2 places where I can tie my test tubes in place. So again, leave myself a tail here, go around 2 or 3 times, and then twist to tie. So you'll end up with a bit of banding across the test tube and these 2 side pieces at the end, and that will enable us to fix our test tubes into the rack that we're going to create. Now, the other close-up thing I want to show you is the making of the structure that's going to support our wires, our test tubes and our flowers. So what I'm going to do here is deciding how much of the wire you need. Now, although I've tried not to get this in a mundful, I'm slightly muddled. So what I'm going to do, I've got the end there, I've lost my other end. I'm going to count, perhaps 10 or 12 coils. That's about 6, go there. So something like that. I'm just going to see one there and cut that away. I think if I do that, it should come apart. No, it doesn't. I just cut myself the tiniest bit of wire, so we'll do that again. That's it, like that. And I've ended up with not what I expected here. I think I might have had 2 separate bits. My piece of wire didn't come direct from the well-known supplier that we all know for our floristry bits and pieces. And I think I've ended up with 2 pieces of wire that don't, I've got sort of 3 ends to it. Not quite sure. It wasn't quite what I was expecting to buy. I hope perhaps you've had more luck than me, but I've portioned off some of this wire. Now, I don't know how much wire you're going to need to use because your structure is going to be different size to me. You may have a different look you want. Perhaps you want a very heavy lot of this wire work on top, or perhaps you might want to go slightly looser and free flowing. But in the event I decide I haven't got enough wire here, I can go back and add in more wire. Now, what I'm going to do here is to coil the wire around. And quite often, if you've used this wire before, you may have seen your tutor wrap it around a pen, something like that. I want bigger coils, and that is why I have used my 1 cal oil spray, and I thought that's quite a nice size. It may be that you've got an aerosol can, something like that. So I'm twisting this wire around the can, twisting it so that it holds the shape. But if you twist it too tightly and it becomes too securely fixed to the mold that you're wrapping around, you'll find it quite hard to slip off. So it needs one of those things where it just needs to be curled in a circle, but not so tight that you're not going to be able to release it. Slide that off, up, I can carry on and going round and round until we get to the end. There we go. And you'll end up with this little springy spring. It looks a bit like a slinky. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit and then measuring up against my my frame here, the length of my coat hanger, just so I know what's what really. I want to make sure it stretches right to the end. And what I'm actually going to do is stretch it a little bit further, and I'm going to join it round in a rough circle. The reason I do this is that if you attach your wire with the pokey out ends either side, it's ever going to be that sort of sharp point that you don't want to see on your little base. So if I tie it together in a circle, it just means that that fixing is hidden, and then I can stretch this out at the end here to be approximately the length of the base of my coat hanger. And hiding those wires, the cut ends, inside by wrapping them around each other. So then I'm going to squash it, and that will give me that sort of organic looking coil. If you were being really brave, you could take your wire off the reel and just scrunch up in your hand as you go, but I've sort of got a controlled spiral going on. So that is what we're going to use to attach our test tubes to, and then attach our flowers to. So that is as much of the close work as I'm going to show you. So what I'll do is I'll bring the camera back to me. So hopefully it's me that you're seeing now, and then put all those little intricate bits together. So we have got our log, a piece of wood with the holes in it, and I am going to put the tiniest bit of hot glue into my holes, just for speed, for security, for stage fright nerves, really. And it's, you know, if you need to glue it, you glue it. But if you've got, you know, your drill bit has been carefully matched to the size of the wire, you might not need to. So it's not a test of seeing whether you can do it without gluing or not. But I'm just getting that extra bit of security, just so as I'm demonstrating, it's not all falling apart. In like that. So I've got my first placement in, and then for me, I'm just going to twist it around so I can reach more easily. I'm going to attach glue into that hole there, and then my second piece of wire goes in there, and my last placement goes in here. So you can see that you probably have a little bit of give and leeway. Just need to take that out so I can get the glue to go in by manipulating your wire a little bit. Oops. Just a tiny bit. Actually, I think I want to try and make that hole a bit bigger. So using my bradawl, just guiding in, I'm going to ping off the hot glue that's dried. I'm just going to put that back in. So that one's firm, but this one, pull off that hot glue, put that down. Fingers crossed, this is now sticking. Oops, daisy. This is when my husband says, does the hole need to go straight through? I thought I'd check them all. But you can see what I'm doing here. I'm creating those parallel lines in which I will then place my wire frame over the top. So this will need to hold a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do, emergency structural work here. I'm just going to nicely see if I can support those together while the glue dries. Hold, please hold. It's wanting to go off on a kinkiness. I know, why don't I adapt? I've got one going straight up and one going sideways. That isn't good news. Oops, daisy. Please behave. Right then. This will be fine. So I'm going to then place my piece of wire on the top. And what I need now are lots of shorter sections of the paper covered wire so I can start lashing on. So I'm using green paper covered wire here with my structure, you know, and whether I would have been better off using a tan so it disappeared, quite possibly, but I will, it's what I had to hand, so that's what I'm using. So I'm threading this through, and it will be tricky to start with because you're going to be, you know, that balance is going to be the key issue. It's wanting to have really a third pair of hands. So I've got one in the center there, and then, so I've done the back center, front center, So what I do is I go around twice. I've gone under, over, and then when it comes to tying it, I'm doing this twist tie action. And of everything we do with our construction work on floristry, the more times you fix, the securer everything comes. So you might be panicking slightly, but do not fear. It will all come together at the end. So then I've gone over that side, twisting round, and I've got these shaggy bits that are showing. And again, once I put my greenery in and my flowers, it may be that they'll be lost in the arrangement and I won't need to bother about them. But if they're looking like a little bit of an eyesore, I will be able to clip those out of the way. So we have got our structure balancing. And also I would say, if you're thinking you want to go for that neat look, clip them off at the end, not right at the beginning, because I'm now going to add in my test tubes and I'm going to add in some greenery as well. So that's what I've ended up with, these sort of tram lines with my decorative wire mesh coating it. And I seem to have, I won't touch it too much, we got over that wobble issue there. And then you might need to leave your loose ends because you might want to control your greenery a little bit. Yes, that would be another option. Just looking at the questions there. Would it be easier to make the structure first before placing it into the log? Now, I think that the reason I did it this way around is that I felt it would be harder and I might spoil the construction by then putting it into the log. But yes, why not try it? And that's all part of class, isn't it? Having a look, visualizing it, working it out. And of course, you won't be under pressure with someone filming you at the time, and you'll be able to be much more patient about it and to take your time. So shall we get on with some of these little test tubes? So again, because I'm slightly aware of the balance issue and the fact that my test tubes are quite long, I'm going to start in the middle and work myself way out to the edge. So as I made those coils, they were quite large. So they give me the opportunity that I can slide my test tube right the way through. And then if I make sure with the longer ties on the edge of the test tubes, I can bring those through and twist tie together. Again, I'm getting these little fronds of the string, the wire sticking up, but they will disappear. They'll either be disappeared into the greenery and in the plant material I've got, or I will be chopping them off at the end. And this is what gives that sort of lightweight floating structure. So we've got one in there. And to keep the balance as well, remember that you've created this column of structure, so it's got a front and a back. So do you want to put in your test tubes straight down the middle, or to sort of zigzag them across? So perhaps one in the middle, one to the front, one to the back, one to the middle, and just have a little think about that as well. So it's just every time you come and do a little bit of the work, just pause momentarily and think, how am I going to do this? What impact's it going to have on that balance? So that goes in like that, twisting round. And then the other side as well. If you think your structure is more stable or your tubes are smaller, obviously you could just fix your test tubes in from one binding point, and then you won't be fiddling around so much. So it's a matter of what you need to do in your particular work of art that you are creating. So for the moment, I thought it's just demonstration purposes. I'm only going to put 3 of my test tubes in. When we make and create afterwards, I will probably do a little bit of adjusting. I had imagined I would get at least 5, if not 7, but again, it's personal preference as to what you want to do. But I think really you've got the idea of where I'm going with this. I have got my structure with my test tubes hanging down. I'll go on. It looks a bit lopsided, doesn't it, if I don't add more in? So let's go for 5. Just bear with me for a moment. So while it's there, and the more I add in, and the fasten the fixings, I can feel it's all becoming much firmer as well. So this last one with my 2 pieces of wire here, halfway down and pull my wires out to one side, and then exactly the same thing, and take my wires out to the other side, and that can go right across the end here. And twist to hold in place. Twist, twist, twist. So that's what we got. And the next thing you would then do is to fill your containers, your little test tubes, with water. Now, it may well be you've got one of those lovely little squeezy filler uppers, and I don't have. And what I do tend to do is, I think I might have been a suggestion from one of you in the group here. I've got a syringe here, and then I would put the water in my test tube like this. I'm not going to fill mine up. I'm a bit nervous about water in my arrangements when I'm filming, so I'm going to put my water in afterwards. So now comes the time when we've done our mechanics, is to start filling up with our natural plant material. So I'm going to start off with something that is quite, my greenery, that is quite flexible and vine-like. And this could be ivy, clematis, Virginia creeper stems. I did discover though that we have some winter, well, we have some jasmine in the garden, and I thought they might make some lovely flexible pieces to work with. So I'm going to put those on the floor, put those across my lap, and see, start to thread them in. Now, my structure is this long. I don't have to keep my greenery this long. It can, disappear off with tiny tendrils at the end. So what I'm doing is measuring up, eyeing up how far off to this side I want to go, thinking about my materials. It's getting a slightly bit woody, this end stem here. So I'm going to take off the lower greenery. I'm going to aim for this last test tube. I can see that I'm going to have to cut that down to length. So that'll sit in the test tube in its little bit of water. And if you leave it naturally where it wants to go, it's just going to want to ping right up. So I'm then going to tame it a little and bring it down, and using those twist ties from fixing in the test tubes, or indeed fixing the little aluminium frame, it just holds it a little bit. And this is where everything starts to become a little bit disguised. So I've got a nice twist at that end. So I'm going to pick a nice, and sort of thinking, measure up, I came that far out of the structure that side. If I turn it round, I can have that much flowing out the other side, and then putting that down inside the test tube, and then again fixing it in place. And this is what is giving the appearance, once we've got this finished and sitting about against a wall where you're finally going to have it, the test tubes will disappear, the structure will disappear, and it will just be as if you've got these little pieces of greenery literally floating above your container. And then, add in as much or as little as you like. Now, it may be that, you don't want to put everything into the container. You might want to, if you've got really robust greenery, you could lash it straight onto the framework. I know my jasmine isn't going to last though out of water, so I'm just going to put a few more pieces in. I might actually though go down and then use this little bit of wire here to hold in. So not everything needs to go up. Think about it from all sides, and just getting that loose flow to come round, and then a very wiggly bit on the other end into that test tube there. And again, I might want to come underneath and out the other side. So it's entirely up to you how you want to play that. At the moment, I have just reused all the fixings I've already got. But of course, if I wanted to attach something in place where I didn't already have a fixing point, I would just cut myself off another piece of the binding wire and add that in. So I shall snip there. And what I tend to do is to wrap it around the framework first and then tie it off. So I wrap it around and I do a little twist, and then I can add that in over the top there, and that will hold in place like that. So you start to get a green haze, and then you decide, how much green you want to go, how light. Oh yes, I did say jasmine. I think I changed my mind. I was going to say winter jasmine, but of course that's the one with the yellow flowers on the quite stiff stems. This is the jasmine with the tiny white flower, so it has got a bit of a bend to it. The other thing I was going to options in my garden, thinking about using ivy, and if I felt that the leaves were too heavy on the ivy, I had the option of stripping some of them away. So once you've got your sort of your structure there, you're starting to blend everything together so it doesn't look like a pair of coat hangers attached to a wood block. You're starting to get that blended look. You can then start to bring your other materials in. So I've got a variety of things here. I've got my lobelia, the hot lips lobelia, and I've picked the one that doesn't have the red line on it. I've got some fennel, a little bit of hydrangea, and then flowers that have been, sort of noticed the orphan flowers left over from class. So I've actually got some asters from class that I did in the week. And some of those asters are going to be too large. They're going to look too heavy. So I'm only going to use the side shoots. And then here, I've got one of these, a few stems left from one of the exotic South African foliage bouquets. And this, I think, rather than being exotic and South African, is heather. And I thought that might look quite nice. So it's a matter of going through and cutting small pieces, you know, finger to thumb length long if you're unsure, and start to layer up. And again, thinking about your balance. If you start working on one end of your arrangement, it's going to become heavy in relation to the other side, the actual weight, and you don't want this bending and bowing. So as you go along, you might feel more comfortable starting to add your materials in the central area and then coming out. So if you did want to go, you know, I think probably this aster is slightly too large. Oh, floating flowers, yes, yeah. The idea being that visually the flowers look like they're floating. You know, that sort of is like a magician's trick, that they are floating in air. And you can see as I start to add something more substantial that you really get that impression now, because the flowers aren't springing out from the base of the arrangement. They are coming out as if they are floating on the air there. And then you build up, you layer up and layer up. So keeping to my word, I must remember to keep my balance and work my way across. And is this going to be a front-facing arrangement? Are you going to see it from all sides? If you are going to see it from all sides, you just need to remember to make sure that your flowers are visible. I'm going to switch those out, actually. They're quite small and quite pale. So I'm going to come in with a slightly darker one, just so we get a bit of oomph in the middle of the arrangement before we start going. And of course, remembering that you will need to add water to your finished piece. I'll go through with one flower at a time. I've got these tiny buds. That was what I was trying to concentrate on. The little buds that are smaller and more lightweight, and therefore is going to help me in terms of my actual and visual balance that I've got on going here. So I've used up, you know, I've gone once up with my jasmine. I've got a few pieces of heather in there. I've gone once up and down with my asters, and then think about the next material I'm going to use. So I might use the lobelia next. So I've chosen this because it does look floaty and lightweight. So really sort of keying into that. You're going to, I would say that unless your mechanics are really, really sturdy, if you've got a rose or a gerbera, it might actually be too heavy, not visually, but actually its weight might be too heavy. So that is why I've specifically chosen light and floaty materials to go into my light floaty arrangement. I'm aware of the fact that these are quite fine, so you might not be able to pick them up on the camera, but I will put in a photograph at the end of the video so you can have a look at that. And so you just work your way up and down. A little bit of fennel here, so another scented. I've got my jasmine that's vaguely scented, and actually the lobelia's got quite a distinctive scent to it, and the fennel has as well. So you can see, you know, you need to be against a plain background really, because it is quite lightweight. So you can imagine exactly what I'm going to go and do here, just up and down, up and down. And this is really one of these fine arrangements. It's one of those that you'll get that sense block of wood with the floating element, the cloud-like element, and then you'll want to go closer to the arrangement and then get to see all the individual component pieces. I'm not even sure you can pick it up there, but you can see where we're going with this. So when we make and create afterwards, I will see whether I've got space for my hydrangea. I won't be putting it in as one big floret because it's going to be too actually heavy, too visually heavy. I'll be thinking about whether I can break that down into individual florets. And then I've also got some gyp left over from a project. I'm not sure about the gyp because I kind of feel I've got this sort of cottage garden vibe going on, and I don't know whether the gyp is going with that feel. But certainly, if you were going with, you could do this the whole cloud gyp really, whether it suits you. And it's just, number one, do you like gyp? Number two, have you got it? And does it go with the overall look on it there? So I hope that's given you sufficient guidance as to where we're going with the project. You can see adding the flowers in at the end is the easy and perhaps more pleasurable part of the arrangement. Getting your mechanics right is key, but I don't think you'll have a problem. Number one, because you're not going to be working on camera, and it's just about making sure it's firm. If your fixings aren't firm before you put your flowers in, they're going to become more loose. They're going to become even looser or even more unfirm once you've got your plant material in. And the key to every flower arrangement is getting your mechanics right in order that the flowers can speak for themselves. And you want to admire your flowers without having that sense of worry that it's all going to be falling apart. So I will put some pictures in once I've finished adding in all my little flowers. And I think you can afford to go quite flower heavy in terms of quantity, but you just need to make sure that they're not going to unbalance your overall design. So I'm going to turn off the recording now and say goodbye to you, those of you who are watching the recorded video, and then we'll go to our live Q&A with everyone else who's in the room.
And of course, in my excitement, I forgot to tell you what you needed to bring for class next week. So you'll need foliage. We're going to be making an all foliage arrangement. It's going to be quite small. And if you want a word of inspiration, it's hedgehog. And I'm going to be using Eucalyptus parvifolia. You sometimes find the occasional stem of Eucalyptus parvifolia in your supermarket bunch, but I'm going to go to my florist and pre-order a bunch of Eucalyptus parvifolia just to make sure I've got enough to complete my project. We're also going to be using a vintage, or for me it's vintage, you can get these brand new, pin holder, and you'll need a shallow dish, a saucer perhaps, or a sundae glass to put your pin holder in. You'll need to fix it in place. And you can do this by either using floral fix, or my preference at the moment is museum wax. I've got a great big tub of that. It's going to last me years and years. And I've also, as an extra tool, got a stainless steel drinking straw. We're going to be lying our greenery on here, and because we need to push it in place, rather than hurting your fingers on the sharp prong, I'm going to use my straw to hold the materials in place. We're also going to make a very delicate flower out of the leaves from the Eucalyptus parvifolia, so you'll need some of your stem tape as well, just so we wind and bind that together. So I do hope you've enjoyed the class, and if you've got any questions and queries, you're welcome to leave them either in the video, in the comments section underneath the video. You will need to be logged into your YouTube account when you do this. I think that's your Gmail account. You can reply to the email I've sent you, or you could ask a question in the Facebook group Flower Start World. Out of preference, I like you asking questions in my Facebook group. It gives a bit of a buzz around the class. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you again next week.